Lisa's with us as well. Good afternoon, Lisa.
Good afternoon, John. How are you?
So nice to see you. And of course, you've been busy reading and reviewing and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to read an excellent book by author Robert Reid called White Light, Red Fire, A Small Nation's Fight for Freedom from Tyranny and a Deadly Foe. And it's an absolutely wonderful book.
Excellent. Well, not only that, we've got Robert Reid on the phone. Say hello.
Hello.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
To blether with you.
Yes, we do like our blethers, don't we? I'm just wondering, but I've really enjoyed reading your book, and I'm just wondering where you mentioned that the story was triggered. Can you tell us what the inspiration for that was?
Lisa, it was a long time ago when it sort of started, and I guess, I've always been interested in Scottish history and Scotland Wars of Independence, Robert the Bruce, etc., etc. But I didn't really want to write a historical fiction because people have done that and probably did it much better than me. And so actually the starting point of the book was, in fact, writing the prologue, which kind of created in my head a fictional land and a fictional story, and it sort of developed there. In my head, of course, it's also kind of following the story of Robert the Bruce, i.e. a big bad king, Edward I of England, in the Bruce case, King Dewar in my case, trying to take over a smaller nation for whatever reason, and so the story just grew from there.
Mm-hmm. So how did it feel creating that imaginary fantasy world?
It to an extent almost creates itself.
Uh-huh.
The strange thing I found with writing, and I'm on my second novel currently, is once you start writing the story kind of takes over a little bit, and I suppose it's a little bit like when you watch a film or read a book. Your mind is kind of looking ahead into what's happening, and when you're writing your own book, when you get to concentrate on it, it almost creates itself. And once you create the characters have a place to play, and that's what you write about.
Mm-hmm. How did it? Because I know that the book took you. It was a period of time to write, and it comes across very much as a labour of love. Because you started writing, saying in 2002.
Oh yeah. Long time ago. And what happened was there was a bit of space in my work career, which allowed me time to start to write the book, but then work and other things took over, and it sat there in its sorry little file in 2002 or 3 or something like that, and it was only about 18 months ago when I had more time to focus on it that I picked up, encouraged by a friend to get on and write the thing, and then about 12 months later it got to publication. So it was about having the time and having the push, I guess, to go and get on with it and make it happen.
I'm wondering how, because I was very much, when I was reading the book and reading the story behind it on Goodreads and speaking to yourself, you're very, the words labour of love absolutely came in my head, and I looked at the publishing date, which was the 21st of March this year, and I'm wondering how that felt for you to hold your book after that amount of work and dedication you'd put into it.
I mean, it was funny to me, I think, because the first book you get is the proof copy from the publishers, which isn't the final copy. And it goes round lots and lots of loops. So, my original final word version got sent to my editor. I paid for a professional editor, Chris Newton. And it was probably another 6 months going round and round, rereading, correcting, picking up flaws in the narrative, etc. So when the first book came through, it was very exciting. More exciting was when the first package of 50 of the proper published books came through to me. And, my delight has been to be able to give signed copies of my book to friends and family. And there's something tactile, I think, about passing on a book that I don't think you can possibly get with an e-book. It's when you give somebody the real thing, they look at the cover, they look at the back, they flick through it, look at the maps, and it's a kind of, oh, wow, moment, which I don't think you can get from an ebook. So I have actually more enjoyed just the pleasure of saying to a friend who's visiting, oh, by the way, my novel's just been published. Would you like a copy? Loved it.
That must be a lovely sentence to be able to say to people. And I can understand what you're saying in terms of, because I don't think there's anything quite like visiting a bookshop.
Yeah.
And walking round and picking up those copies of that book, especially one that you spent such an amount of time writing. When I was reading the book, Bob, it came across really well the amount of research that you had done, particularly when it came to the battle scenes. Because I very much, they became very alive in my head. I could almost feel you acting them out because they were so detailed. And how did you go about doing that research?
Again, Lisa, I think it's a funny mix. Some of it just kind of came into my head. Some of it I've read. Probably my favourite of the Wars of Independence of Scotland is Robin Young's Insurrection trilogy, and so I borrowed some of the narrative from that in terms of the descriptions, and then the wonders of Google. So Google Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, and you get the way it was lined up, where the different forces were, what they went through, and in the case of White Light Red Fire, that battle reenacts itself in fantasy and fiction at a place called Erbia. But also Google, things like names, when you try to find different names. Just the current book, Drawn Away, actually has some names that are kind of Norse origin. So if you type in Google Norse male names, you get a whole list, so you select a name. It's so easy in our world to get information. Too much information sometimes.
When you were speaking about creative space, I came across a quote from yourself which I thought was wonderful. And you'd said on Goodreads, I think inspiration comes from having a story you feel is worth writing and being brave enough to write it.
Yeah.
Which...
listen, and you know this as well. I think lots of us have stories to tell, but unless you're brave enough to write it, it won't happen. And I would say, don't write it because you think you're going to be rich and famous. I've sold not very many books, and I haven't got anybody wanting film rights yet. But to an extent, the pleasure is writing your story, writing it to an extent for yourself. And the challenge, I think, is that I found is finding the time to do it, or making the time to do it. I say that the second novel is on its way up to about 60 pages or something like that, and I started that in November last year. But then, as White Light Red Fire got closer and closer to being finished, all the time got taken with all of the reviewing and reading of that, and so I've only got back to the next story literally in the last couple of months after White Light Red Fire was published.
So it's almost like you've had a ceremonial saying goodbye of the first book before you were going on to the next one.
Yes, I think that's right. I think anybody who's listening who feels like they could write a book, my encouragement would be do it. But what you also need, I think, is friends and family that will read it and criticise it and push you, and because sometimes you get stuck. My favourite kick in the bum person is my wife Phyllis, who will say to me, "Well, stop faffing around. You know what? Just go and write some more of the story, because when you write it, it writes. If you just stay stuck, you just stay stuck."
That your love of Scotland came through very much within the story, and what I really enjoyed was it wasn't just your characters that drove the story, it was also your place. And I love the way the book starts. There's this particular line which I think is beautiful. The skies were filled with unreal fire, blue burnt with amber, red, orange and yellow. This fire was no natural thing. It clawed across the sky, and below all life shivered and retreated. The land lay scorched, the mountains and glens trembling. It's so evocative.
Thank you. And that was probably the very first line that was ever written. And what did they say? What did they say about Scotland? You can take the Scot out of Scotland, but you can't take the land out of the Scot.
Yeah.
Something like that. And we've lived here in Highworth in Wiltshire in the south of England for maybe 37 years now. But the heart is still Scotland.
And Hoyk.
And Hoyk was my childhood. So I was in Hoyk between 6 and 17, and then it was Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh, and then we moved south for work to Cheshire, and then on here for work to Highworth. But I think more than anything else, Phyllis and I would still say we're at heart Scots.
You've also got some poetry and songwriting you've done as well. You've done 7 albums of music, of which you've won awards for. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your music?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess poetry is one of these things that many of us probably did in late teens and early 20s for girlfriends or fiancés or whatever. So
it sounds like there's a story there, Bob.
Sorry. So poetry was kind of the start, and then once children came along, I enjoyed just making up stories for the kids, and we used to have characters like Arthur Ant and Stuart the Spider, just complete made-up stories. And so I think that sort of side of creativity has always been there. And when I didn't get enough time to concentrate on writing White Light, Red Fire, it wasn't even called that back then, then the poetry and the songwriting became easier because, writing a song takes an hour or two, whereas writing a book you really need to sit down and concentrate for a longer period of time.
Yes, absolutely.
But as the first recorded album is called More a Poet Than a Balladeer, the songs are all pretty much lyric first and music second, and interestingly enough, as the novels have come to the fore, the music has kind of gone to the background again. So the creative world just changes, I think.
Yes, absolutely. It's like different wallpaper, I think. Now, so the book has received 5-star reviews, and can you tell us where it is available?
Yeah, it's pretty much through any of the normal outlets. It's available on Amazon, Google Books, Goodreads. If you just Google White Light, Red Fire, it will come up with all the places it's available, both as an ebook and as a paperback copy. Pretty much through any outlets, even right through to Waterson's, but not on the shelves in Waterson's. I think in Waterson's you can go in and order it to be picked up, and it's certainly available online from them. So online from a number of different sources. The publishers did all of that.
Right, that's great, and we're looking forward to hearing about the next one and more of your music when the wallpaper changes again.
And next one, interestingly, I think you asked me this by email. Next one is in the same countries, but a different story, and actually it's proving a little bit harder to write because White Light, Red Fire runs over about 3 years. The next one runs over about 30 years, and I probably don't have the history quite as clear in my mind as I did for White Light, Red Fire. But equally, if I take 15 years to write the next one, I probably won't be here to finish it.
But that's the beauty of the process, isn't it? It's the just unfolding of the story at the right time.
Yes, and back to one of your earlier questions, if somebody's got a story to write, kind of let the story flow, because I found it just did. I didn't have to work that hard to make it go. I just had to sit down and do it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bob. It's been lovely to speak to you. I know that you are a fan of Scottish music, particularly a little bit of Runrig.
Oh yeah, Runrig. I've been 40 years music to my life.
Oh, right. So we'll try and put some on for you now.
Oh, that'd be much appreciated.
And Bob's book, White Light, Red Fire, is available in all good retailers, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thanks. And Lisa, I guess the only thing I can now finish off with is wish Raith Rovers all the best for the coming football season.
We will need it. Thank you very much.
Take care, Lisa. Thank you for the call.
All the best.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.
In the distance, day was dawning. comes to me.